Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, and crypto link in the info box below the video. Now, we are joined by Brian's Logic, the Adam Meakin. We're also joined by Refracted Curvature, and was there anybody else in this server? No, and a whole bunch of people in Gilded. So welcome, one and all.
Hello.
Hello.
Evening, everyone.
Good evening. So Brian's got a presentation that he's not necessarily run by us before he's doing. So if we're a little bit vague with Brian during his presentation, he's only hinted at certain aspects of it because he wants to go through the full presentation with us as much as he wants to go through it with you. So we're going to be as privileged and as kind of in the dark about this, although we did get a vague, very, very vague run through in the very short pre-show that we had. But let's just do a quick introduction with Brian first of all. How are you doing, Brian?
Hey, Nathan. Thanks for having me on the show, and thanks for everyone for coming to watch. I just didn't get a chance to go through this. It's not that I was trying to keep it secret, but I just didn't get a chance in the past few days to go through this with you. It was something that I decided to do because I've heard the same claim from our opposition too many times, and I decided to pull something apart. And it's to do with nautical and statute miles, and certain key parts of the globe model. Right, that's what it's about. It's about basically the globe model is just a hijacking of the circle. That's literally what it is, and that's what this whole presentation is going to be about. Now, there's going to be a good bit of reading in the first part. There's probably about 2/3 reading, 1/3 visual, 1/3 visuals, and I'll even be probably being a bit generous there with the visuals. But I have to go through what I'm going to go through, and because there's so much reading, I don't want to keep on reading and have people just listening and me droning on. I'd like to stop and ask the panel or whatever, do make sure people understand what I mean. Even with the first page, make sure people understand what I mean and where I'm coming from. Because it's a very simple thing, but to explain it simply and to go through all the minutiae of it is not so simple. But at the very end, they go, I'm feeding back down on someone. At the very end, they go, now I know what he means. For anyone who may not follow along, they go, now I know what he means. It's basically pointing out a geometric impossibility on the model, on the globe model.
Cool. Do you want to get straight into it, or did you want to do any housekeeping, so to speak, before you do launch into it?
Well, I don't have anything to do unless you have anything there's anything in particular. If you might hear my chair squeak a bit, it's a bit creaky. Attention to it.
Not that kind of housekeeping. I think we'll just get straight on with it. I'll stick your screen up. Tell me when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready to go. Yeah,
okay.
If everyone else is ready.
Yeah.
Okay, we can start in. Yeah. It's 10:05. Okay, this is called the globe's great circle hijacking. The globe model is based on and defined by a circle, and each and every circle is identical to each and every other circle. Regardless of the size of the circle, all circles are exactly the same, as they technically all have the exact same radius value, as all radii are technically the exact same size. All radii are 3,440 nautical miles. All diameter are 6,880 nautical miles. What this means is that 3,440 minutes of arc from around the circumference of a circle will always equate exactly to the radius of that circle. And 6,880 minutes of arc from around the circumference of a circle will always equate exactly to the diameter of that circle. This is the law of circles. That's what I just call it the law of circles, because it is. Basically what that means is regardless of the size of the circle, or sphere, whichever, or let's say I'm saying circle as a size of a sphere. Regardless of the size of it, there will be 3,440 minutes of arc along its circumference will always equal Now, it might be slightly more, slightly less, right, than 3440, but that's like in the ballpark of it. Will always be exactly the radius of the circle. And 6,880 minutes of arc will always be exactly the diameter of the circle, regardless of the size of the circle. Because that certain arc length, that amount of arc length, let's say, that of 3440 minutes, will always equal a straight line radius for that circle. And the 6,880 minutes arc length will always equal the diameter. So that is like a constant throughout every circle in history ever. Whether it be past, present, or future, every circle, that is just something that is part of a circle. Okay? Everyone understand that?
I'm following along so far. Anybody got any?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Every circle has a circumference that is divided up into 360 degrees. And each one of those degrees is divided up into 60 minutes of arc/degree, and each minute of arc arc/degree is divided up into 60 seconds of arc/degree. This means that every circle has 21,600 minutes of degree around its circumference. But this also means that every circle has 21,600 nautical miles around its circumference, as each minute of degree is 1 nautical mile. But why is this so important? Question mark. This is important because the only time that we can measure nautical miles, and those nautical miles have an exact 1.1508 conversion rate between them and statute miles, is when we measure horizontal distances. And we measure horizontal distances via angles to celestial bodies, where 5,400 nautical miles will always convert to 6,214 statute miles. I think someone has the mic open. So what I'm conveying here is just the basics of a circle, and that every circle has 21,600 minutes of degree around its circumference, which means that every circle, regardless of its size, always has 21,600 nautical miles around its circumference, because the nautical mile is only a minute of degree. That's where the nautical mile came from. The conversion rate between the nautical and statute mile, that happened afterwards, but that only happens in horizontal measurements, like we do with sextants. That's the only time that you can have that conversion. It has to be a horizontal measurement. There is no other way for that conversion to happen. You have to actually measure the minutes of degree. They become, obviously, a coaltitude distance. Then they become your zenith distance in nautical miles. And then the conversion rate works. So that's what the conversion rate is based off of, a horizontal 1.1508 conversion rate between nautical to statute. But that only works, this is the most important part of this, that only works horizontally. You can't measure you can't, with the exception of one thing, measure in an azimuth and have that work with your azimuth. It won't work. Okay, well, we'll get to that. Okay, everyone clear? Let me know if there's anything you want to ask.
Well, other than now, you related it to the azimuth, but you said you'll come back to that. So yes, okay so far.
Yeah. But this means that we can never be sure when we measure azimuth angles that the circumference of the circle of arc length that we measure will adhere to the 1.1508 conversion rate between nautical and statute miles. Okay, I'll go through this page and I'll explain. There is another factor to this dynamic, though, and that is that the radius of the azimuthal arc length that we measure will always convert from nautical miles to statute miles at the correct ratio of 1.1508, as long as we are measuring along the surface of Earth. So the radius of your measured azimuthal arc length will always have a correct nautical to statute mile conversion rate once the measurement takes place along the surface of Earth. But your arc length is not and can't be predicted to adhere to this 1.1508 conversion rate if your arc length is being measured from the internals of a spherical object. What I mean by this is that I'm talking about this as in a way of not measuring like an azimuthal in your kitchen. I'm talking about if you're making an azimuthal measurement with an implement like a sextant or whatever in the large scale. You won't, you can make sure that the radius of that azimuthal measurement, let's say if you measure a circumference or an arc length, you can make sure that the radius of that will adhere to the nautical to statute mile ratio. But there is only one instance where the radius will be a nautical to statute mile correct ratio, and the arc that you measure will also be. There's only one instance where that's true, right? But the most important thing is, for that to happen, the radius must be measured on the surface of Earth horizontally. That is the only way for it to happen. So you can measure a radius that in minutes of degree that will match nautical to statute mile conversion rate, and have the arc that you measure, the azimuth you measure, also match nautical to statute 1.1508 in one particular instance. But the radius has to be measured on the surface of Earth, and the radius must be a horizontal, because you have to measure horizontally for that conversion rate to work. Okay, I'll go on and I'll explain it. So I'll start here again. So the radius of your measured azimuthal arc length will always have a correct nautical to statute mile conversion rate once the measurement takes place along the surface of Earth. That's the most important part. But your arc length is not and can't be predicted to adhere to this 1.1508 conversion rate if your arc length is being measured from the internals of a spherical object. The point I'm making here is, if your radius is coming from the center of a sphere, then that's not a nautical mile conversion from minutes to nautical mile to nautical miles to statute conversion. That's not. That you have not measured nautical miles. You haven't measured anything from the internals of anything. The nautical to statute mile ratio only works when you measure the nautical miles in a horizontal using minutes of degree, using a sextant or whatever, along the surface of Earth. That's the only time that ratio comes into play. And the reason that it's the only time is that's where the ratio comes from. We didn't get the ratio from measuring the inside of a basketball. We got the ratio from measuring along the surface of Earth. That's the point. So if there's any questions, you can ask, but if not, I'll keep going. So if you're claiming that you live on a globe Earth, and you claim that this globe Earth of yours has a statute mile radius that is just shy of 3,959 statute miles, then your globe's equatorial circumference can't be called a real-world nautical mile. Nautical mile measurement. Okay. The reason for this is that no circle can have a circumference where nautical miles convert to statute miles at the ratio of 1.1508, without the radius of that circle being measured horizontally upon the surface of Earth. But the globe Earth's equator line is 24,857 statute miles in circumference. And this is a direct conversion at the ratio of 1.1508 from 21,600 nautical miles, which means that every nautical mile along the globe Earth's equator line will convert correctly to statute miles at the ratio of 1.1508. So seems legit. Everything's working for the globe, right? That's what they want you to believe.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Is that you said there was only one instance. Is that the instance? Is that the only one?
That is the only instance. And I'm going to get back to it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only instance. But it's not an instance. What I mean by it's the only instance, geometrically it's the only instance, but in reality it's not an instance, because the radius they have for their globe to have that around our equator doesn't come from this horizontal measurement. It's not horizontally measured on the surface.
Well, that's where I was going to go next, but it sounds like you're going to get to that. So, okay, fine. Unless you're chopping it in half, which we're not. So, okay, great.
Yeah. No, that's where we're going to. That's where we're going to. 1 second. But yeah, if anyone has anything they want to say, I'd rather they ask rather than not. Rather than people not know what I'm talking about.
At this stage, I would say I'm 70% keeping up with you. Adam, are you keeping up?
Yeah, I don't want to distract. It's a really interesting point that Brian makes there. Certainly with regards to these distances, if they're derived with regards to a radius and the surface, when we apply the Haversine formula at altitude. So I'll just keep listening because it's good stuff. Like I say, he was totally secret squirrel beforehand, so I didn't have a clue.
Secret squirrel.
Yeah, what was going on? So I am just listening, but there's lots of interesting points he's making for me so far.
Okay, well, I'll do a quick call to action. So please share the show. Smash the share button if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much if you've shared the show. This is fascinating stuff, and you're getting to hear our reactions to it firsthand, new, fresh. But yeah, please continue, Brian.
Okay. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, it's okay. When at the end, it'll be so simple at the end, but I have to go through all this to kill the globe. I must go do this in the way I'm doing it. Okay. When measured correctly in the horizontal, every degree of measurement along the Earth's surface will equate to 60 nautical miles and or 69.04 statute miles. But this is only if these measurements are made in the straight-on horizontal and not as an arc length or circumference. Unless your straight-on horizontal measurement is a straight line distance that is 3,440 nautical miles, and this then becomes the radius of your arc length or circumference, as then you will have a correct nautical to statute mile conversion ratio of 1.150 around your circumference, as pi is 3.139542, right? That's pi, more or less. So the point I'm making there before I go on is that the only way you can have a correct conversion from statute to nautical, from nautical to statute around the circumference of a circle is that if you measure that circle with a straight line radius on the surface of Earth, a horizontal straight-on measurement with a sextant or whatever, and that is then 3,440 minutes of degree or nautical miles. Then it will convert the statute miles. The radius and the circumference will both convert correctly at the ratio of 1.1508. But that is the only real world example of where it actually happens. That would be the only way it can happen. There is no other way it can happen. That is the only way mathematically that you will get that to happen. Where the ratio will from nautical to statute will fit both the radius and the circumference. Because it's normally only the radius. But in this one instance, you have the radius and the circumference. But the radius, and this is the important part, must be measured horizontally along the surface of Earth and not come from the center of a sphere. That's the important part. Because that's not a nautical mile measurement. Okay, so as pi is 3.139542, pi is a bit of a funny number. There's actually 18 numbers in some of the references to pi. If we take our 3,440 r, which is our radius, and double it, we will get 6,880 d, our diameter. And if we then multiply this by pi, we get 21,600.04896. And if we then multiply this by 1.1508, we will get 24,857.3363 right? Just putting in all the numbers for people who want them. The point being here that the globe Earth's equator distance somehow, question marks, seems to be just the correct size for the nautical to statute mile conversion ratio of 1.1508 to match. But there was no measured horizontal surface distance radius measurement in nautical miles to convert to the statute mile claim of just under 3,959 miles. So the point I'm making here is there is no radius measurement to support this claim. That's the point, right? Somehow the globe's equator matches this perfect. And this has been used, and I've heard this countless times since 2015, about how around the circumference of the globe, the nautical, the statute, it just matches, and it's all goes so perfect. And this has been kind of a globe claim for a long time. But it's not. It's actually a destruction of the globe, what you see at the end. All nautical mile distances are measured horizontally upon the surface of Earth. And if the globe Earth does not have a horizontally measured radius that was measured along the surface of the Earth that supports their equator length, then their equator length claim is false. Horizontal measurements don't and can't exist on a spherical surface. So the above paragraph is an oxymoron, as what the globe requires, it can never have. They can't have what it needs to make that claim. The nautical mile distance in reality between the GP point of Polaris and the equator is 5,400 nautical miles or 6,214 statute miles, which means that the equator cannot be 24,857 statute miles around, as 5,400 by 2 is 10,800 and 10,800 by pi is 33,907.0536. And 33,907 by 1.1508 equals 39,020. So 39,020 statute miles is a whole lot more than 24,857 statute miles, which means that in reality, we measure and can measure as a much bigger size to the equator line. If we divide 39,020 by 360, we will get 108 point and with change. So that's just over 108 statute miles per degree. As the only way for us to ever measure an equator line that will match the 1.1508 nautical to statute mile conversion ratio is for us to measure at 3,440 nautical miles distance between the GP point of Polaris and the equator itself. So before I go on, the only way for us to ever have an equator line that is 24,857 statute miles around is for the straight line distance between the GP point of Polaris and the equator be 3,440 nautical miles. But it's not. It's 5,400 nautical miles. It can't be 3,440. That's the only way you will ever have the nautical to statute ratio match your radius and your circumference. So we could do that. We could measure 3,440 nautical miles from the GP point of Polaris or wherever else on the Earth and create a circle from that. And that circle would match the ratio from nautical to statute. But this all would have to be done on a horizontal plane. Can't be done on a spherical object. And you can't measure angles from the center of a sphere. As in, we don't measure angles. The whole nautical to statute ratio comes from horizontal measurements along the surface. We don't just make claims about spherical objects and just take radii from the center of them because we feel like it. That's not reality. But that distance in reality is 5,400 nautical miles or 6,214 statute miles and not 3,440 nautical miles or 3,959 statute miles. So where did the Globe Earth people get their 24,857 statute mile equator claim from then? Question mark. Well, they stole and hijacked real-world horizontal measurements via flat plane elevation angles to Polaris that gave us our 1.1508 conversion ratio and our latitude and longitude grid. They stole and hijacked the length along two corresponding longitude lines, which will be 4 quadrants of 5,400 minutes of degree, which they acquired and changed into 4 arc lengths of a circle that they very obviously have 21,600 nautical miles around its circumference, as all circles always have, right? And they took the 3,440 nautical mile radius of the circle they created and converted this 3,440 nautical miles to 3,857 statute miles. But they didn't take, there was no nautical mile radius. They just took what is the radius of every circle. So they made sure that their equator was exactly 21,600 minutes of degree. So they could then take that equator. They just took the radius of every circumference of every circle. It just happens that the globe happens to just have the exact radius that every circle ever had. If you understand what I mean. All circles have 3,440 minutes of degree. So that's all they did. They just hijacked the circle. That's all they did. After they had hijacked flat plane elevation angle measurements to Polaris. Right after they and hijacked to length along 2 corresponding longitude lines. They just hijacked the circle after that. They made a circle out of those 2 corresponding longitude lines, knowing that they were going to be 21,600 nautical miles in length. Just made a circle out of it. So once you have a circle that's 21,600 nautical miles in length, and you know it's 21,600 nautical miles in length, and you know the ratio from nautical to statute, then it's easy to make a model starting at that point, because that's all they've done. So all circles always have, right? They always have a 3,440 minutes of degree of arc length as a radius. They always have. That's every circle ever. You know what I mean? There's nothing special about this globe. It's just a circle. And they took the 3,440 nautical mile radius of the circle they created and converted this 3,440 nautical miles to 3,857 statute miles. So as this full nautical mile distance across these two longitude lines was already measured, and the conversion rate of 1.1508 was already known, it was easy to acquire. It just made a model. They just made a circular model out of what was already there. That was already measured flat. So, to summarize, all the globe people really did was hijack an already existing horizontal measurement that already had a correct nautical mile to statute mile ratio attached to it, and made a huge circle out of it, knowing that the equator of the circle would correctly adhere to the 1.1508 conversion rate between nautical and statute miles, allowing them to claim 69.004 statute miles per degree at their equator if measured as an azimuth from their central pole. But they maybe forgot one thing. So, and that's where I'm going to get now to the visuals. So I just must change my screen. So any questions before I change my screen?
Not questions, but slightly dumbfounded amazement. I don't know about you, Adam.
Yeah. In the middle of that, I've been and took a picture, right, of stuff I've been trying to work out, of how you're saying it, and that I don't want to say too much. Carry on, because my mind's a whirling, and there's a level of synergy with what I've been doing. I'll share the picture in a bit, but it circles. You know how Brian did the circles of equal altitude stuff. So it's applying that left and right, up and left and right, up and down.
I think you're on the same page.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'd sooner just shut up and keep listening. There is a lot of stuff I want to listen to it again. Certainly some of the claims, in terms of what they're doing, that bit I wasn't sure about. Because that's the mystique, exactly what they are doing. But the points you've made, yeah, spot on, mate.
Well, isn't it very funny that the globe Earth ends up with exactly 21,600 nautical miles around its equator, which it would have to have, because all circles have.
That was the point early on. Back in 2015, yeah, one of the arguments that was thrown at us was the distance around the equator is different on a flat Earth to a globe Earth, because we assume from the heliocentric model that the path of the sun is equivalent to a great circle route round the axis of rotation. And that's the difficult mindset to get out of sometimes.
It is. I think that when I show the visuals, it's going to make it all so simple for everyone. And because anyone who's out there who might be, and I'm sure there's people who are just kind of listening going, and I don't mean this in a bad way, if they haven't been paying too much attention, like, well, what is he talking about? And some people are visual learners. Like I can show sometimes a visual to someone and they get it straight away. So, so sometimes that's the best way to do it. But I had to add in all the text with it, so my argument was being made, basically. So I'm going to present the visuals now, and I'll make it easy.
Okay.
Now, this is just some very basic, right? Very basic things, just for the start. So this line here, right? These lines, right? They represent the globe Earth's radius, right? There's the radii. This is the globe. This is the exact size that the radii would be if it was like just a tangent plane on top. Here we have 4 lines. These are 5,400 nautical miles, or minutes of degree in length. These are 3,440, these ones. So you have 4 of them. So you have one this way, then a second one to the left, and a second one to the right. And have these dots joined with lines. So all they did, just for basics, is they basically, if you can imagine, these are ropes They just pulled this flat plane up. There was like, this is from this center point out to each end is 2 longitude lines. They just pulled it up and made a circle out of it. That's the basics of what they did. After it was already established that there was between this point here, which is K, and this point here, which is L, there was already 21,600 minutes of degree, because each one of these 4 quadrants will, if you're using a sextant, will using a sextant within those will have a maximum of 5,400 minutes of degree. So that's all they did, right? They just hijacked flat plane measurements where we had a conversion rate from nautical to statuate, and they made a circle that just happens to be their globe just happens to be the perfect circle. As in, they have like all circles are a perfect circle. All circles have 21,600 minutes of degree around them, but it just happens that they have a ratio, and nautical to statuate ratio that just happens to match everything. But it kills them, and this is why. Right? So I'm just going to go in here. So on a globe, right, this is their equator, right? This here is one of their tropics. Doesn't matter which one. The equator is obviously bigger. So what we have to remember is when they're pre-assuming a measurement, right, what they're pre-assuming is that they're measuring, right, with a sextant, and it's becoming a measurement along an arc length measurement along the surface of the sphere. Now, this circle here, right, is 3,440 nautical mile or radius length, let's just say, right? So it's a 3440 like all circles, right, from here to here. But this represents their equator, because this here, right, if you took this angle of, let's say you took an angle and from a tangent plane, I'm just going into there, I have to beg the question for them, and it was a 48.47 angle, right, then that would convert along their surface of their sphere, that would convert at a rate of 1.1508 from nautical to statuate miles, right, every time along their equator, right? And they're standing here, and the circle is being measured away from their feet, out in front of them, down. Like you're standing on a hill, and the hill goes out in front of you and down. That's the measurement that's being made, right? Every single time. So someone standing at the equator on a globe with a sextant measuring on the equinoxes will measure a distance, let's just say, in minutes of degree, that will become a 1.1508 conversion to statuate miles perfectly. The ratio will always match, always at the equator at the equinox. If we beg the question of that they could even do that on a globe, right? Just have to beg the question just for that. But on the 21st of December or the 21st of June, they're standing at the, because this is in their belief. Because in their belief, you have to remember, in their globe belief, the equator is a straight line to them. It's one straight line, but so are the tropics. So they're not thinking of they're measuring around in a circle, like as in an azimuth. They are thinking that they're measuring a circle that starts at their feet and ends up back at their feet. One straight out in front of them circle. So they're measuring down and along something that goes around underneath them and comes back up again to meet. And that's their circle. So we know that on the equinoxes, we can stand at the equator and make measurements. I'm feeding back on someone there. And make measurements with a sextant, right? And those measurements will always, in reality, always convert perfectly from nautical to statuate at the rate of 1.1508. We also know that we can do that at the tropics on the 21st of December at the Tropic of Capricorn, or the 21st of June at the Tropic of Cancer, right? We know we can do that, and we will still, in reality, always get a correct conversion rate from nautical to statuate of 1.1508. But on the globe model, what they're dealing with there, when it comes to their Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, on the 21st of December or 21st of June, on the solstices, right? I can never say that word, excuse me, is this measurement here will not be a 1.150 measurement. They won't get 69.04 degree statute moles per degree. They get like 64 statute moles per degree. They don't get a 69.04 like they get at their equator, because they're measuring a circle out in front of their feet. This is what they believe is happening. So consequently, this is a smaller circle. So that changes the conversion rate from nautical to statuate. They don't have a 1.150 conversion rate then. So the only times that they can have this conversion rate is at their equator, right? If they can't have it at the tropics. So here is a comparison, right, of, I just move these up a little bit so people can see. I can't move this one too far, just so people can see, and I'll zoom in, right? Here is a comparison of the equator measured on a flat plane, and this is the tropics measured on the flat plane. Now, it doesn't matter because they're just circles. They're just circles. This is the Tropic of Cancer on a flat plane, not Tropic of Capricorn. So this is just a circle, but we're measuring horizontally. So we will always, all our measurements, that's why we can use circles of equal latitude. They're always, in reality, horizontal surface measurements. So we're always able to convert from statuate to from nautical to statuate at 1.150, regardless of the direction, or regardless of the time of the year, regardless of the position we are on Earth. We can always measure a distance that will always convert correctly from nautical to statuate miles. But they can't do that, because if they do it on the equinox within their model, they can do it along the surface of their equator. But on the 21st of December on the Tropic of Capricorn, or on the 21st of June on the Tropic of Cancer, they can't do it. They don't have 69.04 statute miles per degree. They have less than that, because they're dealing with a different ratio. But that's not what we deal with in reality, is it? We don't deal with that in reality. So just to show, I'm just going to give, just to appease.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really important point, right? So at that point of equinox on the tropics, do the solar measurements still maintain their degrees, the equivalent nautical miles?
Well, yeah. I mean, because if you were measuring, I'd have to just 1 second now. I'll show you. If you were measuring, wait a second. I'll just get a circle here, and I'll show you what. If we were measuring,
yes, would have done.
Yes,
to the point, right?
Yeah.
Nathan, do you get what's being said here?
No.
This is really cool.
No, I don't.
If you were at let's say this is the equator or whatever. If you were measuring an angle to the sun, I don't know what the sun is. I don't know how much of the sun we see doing what it does. I don't know how it does what it does. But we wouldn't be measuring in a circle, you see, because you don't measure in a circle in reality with a sextant. When you're measuring degrees, you measure in a straight line. So you're measuring like this. You're measuring like that. That's the way you're measuring. You're not measuring around in a circle, if you understand what I mean. You're not doing that. You're not measuring in a circle. You're measuring in those ways. You're measuring straight lines, horizontal straight lines. So you're not measuring around in a circle. So that's why we always, in reality, using a horizontal plane, can always, we don't even have to think about it. We will always have the correct conversion rate, regardless. But you can't have on the globe, only certain directions will work on the globe. And certain things will work on the globe for that, within the model, right? But they can't do it because they can't do horizontal measurements anyway. But the point I'm making, even within their model, they can't make it work when it comes to the tropics, if you understand.
Okay. Maybe if you start from the beginning, I'll get it.
As far as I can see, there's a stellar movement rate. Oh, and in this case, it has to be the sun, doesn't it? Right.
Yeah. Well, I just using the sun as an example. an example there because the equator and the tropics connect to that. This one here might clear it up. Now, this is just a rough one.
Let me just.
Yeah, I'll be quick.
You let Adam indulge me. If you can paraphrase it for me, Brian.
Yeah.
Adam, sorry.
Are you saying that there's the equivalent rate of change, irrespective of latitude, tropic-wise, is equivalent in the same nautical miles, degrees, minutes, arc minutes, irrespective to when the sun's path is straight overhead, and that rate of change is the same at the equator and the tropics. Therefore, if we're going to use that rate of change to equate to the statute mile from the time, the nautical mile, then there should be a difference. I'd agree there should be a difference in the rate of change of the conversion rate of statute miles to nautical miles based on latitude. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Basically, at any time in reality, we can always measure using a sextant a horizontal distance and place that horizontal distance onto the surface of the earth, and we will always have the correct ratio of statute of nautical to statute, but they don't have on the globe. If you look at these red lines, I have one coming from the north to the south, one coming from west to east, another one here diagonally from northeast to southwest, another one here from northwest to southeast. Now, in those directions, because they're taking in the full of the circle, right? In those directions, the 1.1508 conversion rate will work on the globe in those directions, right? But if I just as an extra here, change the color of this so it will be make it that color. But if you were to do it here and try and measure a circle here, right, or here, then you're not going to have, if your circle is this way, you're not going to have a correct 1.1508 conversion rate. And more to the point, I have this blue box where all these lines, the direction of these lines, if this was a circle going around the globe Earth at this point, then that circle is a smaller circle than their circumference. So it can't adhere to the 1.1508 conversion rate. It can't. Neither can this one up here if this was a circle, or this one down here, or this one at the other side. It can't, because it's not. It would have to have a diameter that would be this length, whereas its diameter is that length. That means there's a load of instances on the globe Earth where they can't convert correctly from nautical to statute as per latitude. Whereas in reality, we don't have to do that. We never have to change anything. It all just works. Because we're not measuring along a curved surface. We're measuring in horizontal. That's how the conversion rate exists. And that's how we have it. And that's why it works all the time. We never have to think about that. If we lived on a globe, then the conversion rate would have to change. There'd be no way around it.
Adam, over to you.
I agree. The point that you see, in the ball model, this point of rotation is the rotational axis that all this occurs at. What Brian's describing, all of this is occurring at the observer. That's the. I agree, and because these things are kept constant, these distances, both the arc minute expression, which has no real real surface distance until you put it into nautical statute miles. But when you've got it there, then the consequence of the ball is that the ratio has to change. Yeah, exactly, Brian. As you're moving move it up to the tropics. Yeah, lovely. So we've got a tropic. Oh, well, that's a bit high, but we've got a tropic line, and if that's the circle based on axial rotation, and what we're basing this is that radial value, and those radial values apply because when we convert nautical miles to statute miles, we don't take that circle, we create a great circle. Then there is that disparity would be there on a ball. It's not there because we're not on a ball. But yeah, I agree, Brian. Did that make a bit of sense, Nathan? What you're doing is everything's being derived from a great circle route, but on the equinoxes at the tropics, we still have the sun traveling overhead, and because of that, everything fits still as if that's a great circle route. But you can see, look, it's not a great circle route. It can't be, because it's of its latitude. The circle it can create by its bisection is going to be less than the one at the equator. And that should therefore change things at the equinoxes, change the statute mile. I like it, Brian. It's quite clever. Okay, I'm done.
I have a question.
Go on, John. Let me just show you something. Go on, John.
I was going to say, are you describing why they only apply the Habersign formula longitudinally and at the equator and nowhere else?
No, that's why you can only apply it between point A and point B. That's why it's only applicable between point A and point B. You have to create the great circle. This is why this is quite clever, and I don't know the answer, Brian. It's cool, but this is why that opposes the Habersign, because Habersign always creates a great circle between A and B. This is using the knowledge of the passage of the sun and its angles at the equinoxes, which is not on the equator, not a great circle, creating a small circle, yeah, but the conversion rate's the same. Is that right, Brian? Is that the point you're making?
I understand now that Adam's broken it down, but I did need all the preceding stuff that went along with it from Brian to get that summary from Adam. What you're saying is, as the circle moves over the top of a globe surface, the circle that the sun would create, if you're going to create a circle, is smaller than the equatorial circle. However, what you actually get is the same exact perfect circle that Brian described at the beginning of his presentation. Therefore, you've only got one size of circle that's ever going to be derived. So therefore, when you derive it at the tropic, well, then you're going to have the same size circle as the equator, unless I'm misunderstanding at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I'll explain it here now. So here is the person with the sun at solar noon over them at the globe. Here is a change in angle as the sun goes down. There is the observer looking at the sun. Now the sun has to be far away for them to see it, right? So, so they probably wouldn't be able to see it after a certain point. But they claim that they can see it till the sun gets to here. Gets to here. Just going to take that away, right? And that would be 5,400 nautical miles, right? Which would be 6,214 statute miles between this point and this point, right? So that's the measurement. But if we treat this as one of the tropics, then, and this is the 21st of June, and it's the Tropic of Cancer, and this is solar noon, then this exact same thing is happening within their model. But they will have 5,400 minutes of degree along here, but they won't have 6,214 statute miles, because they can't have. The only way for them to have that would be that the Tropic of Cancer be the same size as their equator.
Right.
So they'd end up in a cylinder.
That was while you were explaining, that's what I was reaching for. Because what was going through my mind was Rob Durham. I've never seen it until he presented it on that video where they showed the globe being projected out to a cylinder, and then they unroll the cylinder, and you've got all of the lines along it, latitude and longitude lines. And you go, okay, so what you end up with is all those lines being the same length of a circle. Well, that makes no sense, right? As you go up the map, it should get smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah. I mean, I can show it here. What I'll do, give me 1 second, I'll just show something. It's going to be this. Let's go from here to here. Right? It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. And I'll go from here to here, right? 1 second now. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to measure these two here. I'm going to have them measured by GeoGebra. So it's going to be 4 here. Right. And I'll show you with a measurement, right?
While Brian's setting this up, the next stage for us, and this is cutting edge stuff in it, makes me proud. It really does make me proud. But the next step is to weaponize it, right? Turn it into a question. Put a scenario together.
Yes. So here we have two different distances, or two different lengths, right? We have 687 here, 99, and we have 65750. So that means that these two diameters, let's just say if that was a diameter here, and this was another straight line here, which would be, let's say, the diameter of this latitude, then that's a change in length. So that would be 6,575 there, as opposed to 6,879 here. So that's a change in length. So there's no way that the 1.1508 nautical to statute conversion rate could be a constant. It couldn't be if we were on a globe. But it is a constant all the time in reality, because we don't measure. We're not measuring an arced distance. We're measuring horizontal distances and creating circles of equal altitude off of those by treating them as a radius. If we were on a globe, there'd be no way to have a constant nautical to statute conversion rate. The conversion rate would have to change with latitude, because you'd never know your distances. You know, if you were measuring along the let's just say we treat it as a tropic of Cancer, 21st of June, and you're in a boat and you're measuring, right, that's my measurement, I'm on the globe, then this distance here would not equate to a 1.1508 conversion rate. So your distances would always be off. And that would only just be, this would have to start off as your supposed radius, which is not. Right? You'd end up then with of course, they'd end up with a smaller circle here, right? They'd end up with a little circle here, because that's how they have to work it mathematically within the model. And then they'd end up doing that 2 more times, and they wouldn't know where they are. Do you know what I mean? Everything would be off. Nothing would work. You couldn't have a consistency. They don't even have a straight line radius. There's nothing they have. It would all go wrong. They'd never know where they are. No ship would ever turn up where it wants to turn up when it wants to be there, if it's trying to use the same conversion rate from statute to nautical, or from nautical to statute. It'd be impossible. They'd always be it.
And incorporated into your description is the fact that in order to do this, what you've got to do is take the measurement as Brian's depicted it. If you're talking about the equator and only the equator. So when they depict it from the centre of a sphere Earth, well, why would that be? Well, it's necessary, isn't it? Because they've always got to have it set at the same circle value based on the equator value. Therefore, all measurements come from the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth, with a circle around it of a given radii. So therefore, that depiction that 10th Man brings up with the globe, with us in a dark little section in the middle of it, right at the centre, well, that puts you at the centre of a plane with, like you say, Polaris drawing out a circle of equal elevation that makes up the equator line. But you can never actually measure that, because you're never standing at the centre of a sphere Earth with a flat radii and a flat baseline to measure the claimed globe radius claimed globe circumference, sorry, at the equator, because you'd have to be doing it stood at the centre with a flat plane expanding out and the circle around the base of Polaris. That's what it is. So it's never achievable anyway. But as you move up that sphere, that circle that's being described wouldn't change in their depictions. You're always at the same spherical centre. But in the surface depiction, the circle gets smaller. It doesn't remain the same size. But it does on the maps. Well, that's because you're talking about areas of equal elevation.
Yeah, that's the thing, you see. This is the observer here. And before they can ever put anything at the center of the globe, they must measure a realistic angle, right? Which means that's why they always have a tangent plane. I don't have it in here now, but normally they have a tangent plane along the top of their globe, as I've shown in other diagrams. So they have to measure. Now, there's another argument off of this as well that I might make another presentation on, but they have to measure the angle between this here observer and this sun or star. Now, as I said, at equinox, within their model, the distance between this point and this point will be 6,214 statute miles along that arc length. But on the 21st of June, on the Tropic of Cancer, it won't be. And it won't be on the Tropic of Capricorn on the 21st of December. Because it can't be. So regardless,
before you brush past it, well, what will it be? It'll be the same as the equator, right?
It would have to be. Their tropics would have to be this. They would have to have a cylinder Earth for the tropics to match up with the equator. They'd have to have a cylinder Earth.
Right.
That makes sense. That is the key point to me. It's not H1. It has to be H1 for a sphere, but that would necessitate a change of conversion rate of the nautical to statute mile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's the overriding summary, isn't it? You'd have to have the conversion rate change as you move up the sphere because the circle that you're describing is reducing in size. It doesn't. It always converts out to the equator rate. It has to because of the way that they've created the circles of equal elevation in the first instance. They're always going to match that value. So, good title, How They've Hijacked a Circle. That's brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it needs to be highlighted because it's another massive geometric inconsistency on the globe model.
Well, further to that, people might start figuring a little bit more out about how the maps are actually representing the terrain, because now we know how their conversion doesn't work for the sphere. Maybe it'll give us a better impression of what the maps are actually doing when they work correctly. And they do limit the maps in terms of how they'll represent the sun with the azimuthal equidistant projection, and then how they'll say the land masses represent themselves on the... It's not the Gall-Peters. Is it the Gall-Peters with the correct size land masses that they claim?
Gall-Peters, yeah. Gall-Peters have the correct sizes, yeah.
Right, versus the transverse Mercator, which is how they show things like the ISS traversing and how most people will know as a world map. Well, yeah, there's thousands of them in terms of the variations of world maps, but there's a reasonably limited number that just work correctly with longitude and latitude lines, correct?
Well, what they do, Nathan, is they measure a horizontal distance, and that becomes the radius of a circle of equal latitude. And they make a circle off of that radius, right? And then they do that 2 more times. That's 3 circles. That's a huge expanse of horizontal. But then what they do is they place these 3 circles onto a universal transverse Mercator, which is a complete what's the word I'm looking for?
Cylinder?
No, it's a complete diversion from reality, as it has Mercator sizes like you will see on the universal transverse Mercator. Greenland bigger than it should be, Africa smaller than it should be, all the continents and countries in the wrong position. So they put this massive measurement they're after making, it's so big often that they have no choice but to use a world map. But they put it onto a map that distorts it. That's the word I'm looking for. Distorts reality. And then they take it and they undistort it and add in or with the Havre sign and put those distances along, make those distances what they call great circle routes. Right? All great circle routes are straight lines on a map where most of the time they're longitudinal. They call the equator a great circle route, but it isn't. There is no aeroplane flying the equator route.
Just
because
that is the important point. That equator is the great circle route. Now, whenever the Haversine formula is employed to calculate a distance between A and B, if you could rotate, what Brian, take like any 2 points on that screen, you have to rotate the sphere in such an orientation that the points between A and B become the equator, if that makes sense. They become
yes, it does. That's what I was trying to drive at much more eloquently, but in terms of describing how 10th Man puts you in the center of a sphere world when you're doing this with the Haversine conversion, what that means is that you're always reorientating that outside limitation, the equator circle and its measurement, around you. So you've always got the outside edge at its maximum to match your position, to then convert to the sphere surface to get your A to B point, which means that the conversion rate always bases itself on the outside edge. And if you're going to say, well, no, I'm sitting here over in England, yeah, but you can still draw the outside edge from there all the way around the full sphere and get the same equatorial value to use to make the conversion correct. But only if you're deriving that down into the center of a sphere Earth with you at the center of the point that you drew the entire equatorial value round the outside edge of the sphere to match the map, to match the values that will always be derived from this single circle value.
Yeah. I mean, what kills them in all this, even like, is the fact that on the equinox, an observer can see solar noon, right, the sun directly above them at the equator, and they can watch it, right, within their belief, within their sphere belief, not in reality, within their sphere belief, they can watch it as basically it appears to go down over a circle, right? And that's fine. And that distance here will always match. That will always match the 5,400 minutes of arc here will always be 6,214 nautical miles. But then on the 21st of June, an observer can stand on the Tropic of Cancer on their model, and they're going to see this happen. Same thing, 5,400 minutes of degree, but that won't be this arc length here won't be 6,214 statute miles. As you can see, this arc length is smaller than this arc length. There's no way around that. Even talking about everything, for them to talk about taking anything from a center point doesn't change anything. Because I'm taking it from a center point here, but that doesn't change the size of the circle for the conversion from nautical to statute. So the overriding point I'm making here is, in reality, we never have to change. We don't have to change the conversion rate. It's always 1.1508. That's the conversion rate, regardless of your position on Earth, regardless of your direction of measurement. It's always the same. But it couldn't stay equal on a globe. Even with taking the angle from a center, it has to change, because the circle, it depends on your direction, obviously. Because there is some directions that it will work on, but it depends on your direction. The circle will change in size, because their tilt means that their 23.4 degree tilt means that that on the 21st of June, that this observer is tilted towards the sun. So on the 21st of June, the sun is making a line, and that's where the Tropic of Cancer comes from, is the line of the sun. So the sun is making a line around the Tropic of Cancer. That's what the Tropic of Cancer comes from, and the Tropic of Capricorn, and the equator. They're all based on the path of the sun. So you can't change that. There's no way out of changing the path of the sun. So on the 21st of June, on their Tropic of Cancer, it's just like a slice of the globe. For an observer, that's exactly the same thing as happening on the equinoxes, but it's happening around a smaller circle. So that you'd have to have a conversion change. And if you're ever doing just anything that's not in the right direction, which is not north, south, east, west, or diagonally, anything other than that, you would have to have a conversion difference in reality. But we don't have. It doesn't exist because we don't need it, because we're not doing that.
Cool. I think you've summarised it all, covered it beautifully. Is there any? I know there's only a couple of you in Gilded. Did anybody have anything they wanted to ask of Brian?
I'm good.
Fair enough. Adam, you got anything you want to round out with? I'm sure this is going to generate a lot of discussion.
Yeah, and a lot of thinking. I'm gonna kind of listen back over the presentation again because good points, but I don't see how you can't change the conversion rate. Wicked, Brian. Yeah, love it, mate. It was a very good secret squirrel operation tonight, mate.
Secret squirrel, thank you.
Also good to watch, or for the audience to see that, you know, this stuff is complicated, and cutting edge stuff doesn't immediately. You don't just get the penny to drop immediately. Most things take more than one explanation. I'm going to take several more explanations for this to fully sink in for me. For Adam, I think he's 90% there already. Me, maybe 70% there. But, you know, it's just one of those things. Once we've got our heads around it, hopefully we'll get it more and more concise in terms of the implications and weaponize it into a tool that you can put to a sphere believer and have them, you know, and do their own argument with it. We'll see how it progresses. But so far, it's extremely exciting, cutting-edge stuff. I love it.
Well, thank you. The biggest problem we have with this, and flat earthers will have with it, is you have to think from globe side. You have to think of globe, because I'm working with globe here. On the globe, at the equinox, the sun is like we view the equator and the tropics as circles on a flat plane, whereas they're viewing the equator and the tropics as circles around a globe, and that somebody standing at that tropic or equator at the right times of year will see the sun following that exact line, because that's where the equator and tropics come from. So that's the part. It's the psychological thing of getting off of the flat plane, putting yourself into a globe mindset, and knowing that when you see the sun going down, and you're standing at the Tropic of Cancer on the 21st of June, and you're seeing the sun do this, right? From a globe point of view, the sun is making a circle, making a perfect circle with this circle here. That's what it is. That's the globe. That's what it is. That's the official claim. It can't be anything else. That's where their 23.4 degree tilt comes into it. That's the whole point of it, because they had to explain how the sun can go around both tropics and the equator at those times of year. That was part of the reason.
Perfect. Right, should we?
Thank you.
Well, we're going to put this into our little brains and process it, and hopefully you in the audience will do exactly the same. But with that, I'm going to say, first and foremost, of course, a huge, massive, enormous thank you to Brian's Logic for presenting this to us. And hopefully you all enjoyed getting our first-hand reactions from Brian's presentation. But of course, also a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980, if you've watched this live, or Nathan Oakley premiering stream, if you're watching it after the fact. Massive thank you to all of you who liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a member, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!